Welcome to one of the most remarkable cemeteries in America. Tucked behind office buildings and parking garages on Glendon Avenue in Westwood, just south of Wilshire Boulevard, is a small patch of ground that holds more famous names per acre than almost anywhere else on Earth. This is Westwood Village Memorial Park, and today we're going to walk its grounds together and visit 30 people whose lives shaped the way Americans entertained themselves, thought about the world, and remembered the 20th century. Let's begin. We start near the entrance, where a name you'll recognize immediately greets us. Dean Martin rests here in the cemetery's mausoleum. Born Dino Paul Crocetti in Steubenville, Ohio, in 1917, the son of an Italian immigrant barber, he would reinvent himself as the smoothest man in show business. He got his start singing in nightclubs under the name Dean Martin, and in 1946, his career took a turn that changed everything. He teamed up with a manic young comedian named Jerry Lewis. The two became the hottest act in America, starring in nightclub shows, radio, television, and 16 films together. When they split in 1956, everyone predicted Lewis would thrive and Martin would fade. The opposite happened. Martin proved himself as a serious actor in The Young Lions, and as one of the great leading men of his era in films like Some Came Running and Rio Bravo. He became a charter member of the Rat Pack alongside Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr., and together they made Ocean's 11 and turned Las Vegas into the entertainment capital of the world. Then, in 1965, Martin conquered yet another medium with The Dean Martin Show on NBC, a variety hour that ran for nearly a decade. His secret was making everything look effortless. That glass he always held on stage? His daughter Deanna has said the drunk act was just a gimmick dreamed up by a team of writers. The glass usually held apple juice. The real Dean Martin was a homebody who preferred dinner with his family to a night on the Strip. The greatest blow of his life came in 1987 when his son, Dean Paul Martin, a captain in the California Air National Guard, died in a fighter jet crash in the San Bernardino Mountains during a training mission. Martin never recovered from the loss. He withdrew from public life and spent his final years in quiet solitude. A lifelong heavy smoker, he died on Christmas Day, 1995, of acute respiratory failure resulting from emphysema. He was 78. When the news reached Las Vegas, the lights of the Strip were dimmed in his honor. Stepping away from the mausoleum and onto the cemetery grounds, we come to one of the more unexpected names you'll find here. Ray Bradbury, the man who made millions of Americans look up at the stars and wonder. Bradbury was not a scientist or an astronaut. He was a writer from Waukegan, Illinois, who never learned to drive a car and never flew on an airplane. Yet he became the poet of space travel and the conscience of the future. His 1953 novel, Fahrenheit 451, imagined a world where books were burned by the government, a story that has only grown more relevant with time. The Martian Chronicles, published in 1950, painted Mars not as a scientific frontier, but as a mirror for human longing and folly. And his short story collection, The Illustrated Man, remains one of the finest works of American science fiction. Bradbury was remarkably prolific, publishing over 30 books, nearly 600 short stories, and numerous plays and screenplays over a career that spanned more than 7 decades. He also wrote the screenplay for John Huston's 1956 film Moby Dick. Despite all those visions of the future, Bradbury was a deeply nostalgic man who often wrote about small-town Midwestern childhoods and the magic of October evenings. He died in 2012 at the age of 91, still writing almost to the end. Not far from where the science fiction master rests, we find one of the most beloved actresses of the mid-20th century, Natalie Wood. She was born Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko in San Francisco in 1938 to Russian immigrant parents. Her mother was relentless in pursuing a film career for her daughter, and it worked. Natalie appeared in her first film at age 4. By 8, she was starring opposite Edmund Gwenn and Maureen O'Hara in the 1947 holiday classic Miracle on 34th Street, playing the little girl who doesn't believe in Santa Claus. It's a performance that still airs on television every December. As a teenager, Wood made the rare leap from child star to serious actress, earning an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress for Rebel Without a Cause in 1955, where she held her own alongside James Dean. She went on to star in West Side Story, Splendor in the Grass, which earned her a Best Actress nomination, and Love with the Proper Stranger, which brought yet another nomination. 3 Oscar nominations before the age of 25. She married actor Robert Wagner twice, first in 1957, then again in 1972 after a brief marriage to producer Richard Gregson. On the night of November 29, 1981, during a weekend boat trip to Santa Catalina Island with Wagner and her Brainstorm co-star Christopher Walken, Wood drowned in the Pacific Ocean. She was 43. Her death was initially ruled an accidental drowning, but the case has been revisited multiple times. In 2012, her death certificate was amended to read drowning and other undetermined factors. And in 2018, Wagner was named a person of interest. The case remains officially unsolved. Her pallbearers included Frank Sinatra, Gregory Peck, and Laurence Olivier. Let's cross the grounds now for something completely different. Buddy Rich rests here at Westwood, and if you've never heard of him, your drummer friends certainly have. Bernard Rich was born in Brooklyn in 1917, and his parents, who were vaudeville performers, had him on stage by the time he was 18 months old. By 4, he was billed as Traps the Drum Wonder, and was one of the highest-paid child performers in vaudeville. He went on to become what many consider the greatest drummer in the history of jazz, leading his own big band for decades and dazzling audiences with a technique that seemed physically impossible. Blazing speed, thunderous power, and a showmanship that could fill a concert hall. He played with Tommy Dorsey, appeared on The Tonight Show dozens of times, and was a favorite of Johnny Carson, himself an amateur drummer. Rich was also legendarily difficult. Secret recordings made by his band members of his backstage tirades became collector's items, colorful explosions of profanity directed at musicians who missed a note. He never denied his temper. "I'm the best drummer in the world," he once said, "and I know it." There's a famous story, possibly apocryphal, that when Rich was being wheeled into surgery near the end of his life, a nurse asked if he was allergic to anything. "Country and Western music," he replied. He died in 1987 of heart failure following surgery for a brain tumor. He was 69. From the world of rhythm and swing, we move to the world of letters. A short walk brings us to the resting place of Truman Capote, one of the most celebrated and controversial American writers of the 20th century. Born Truman Streckfus Persons in New Orleans in 1924, he endured a difficult childhood. His parents divorced when he was 4, and he was raised by relatives in Monroeville, Alabama, where his childhood friend was Harper Lee, the future author of To Kill a Mockingbird. They remained close for years, and Lee even accompanied Capote to Kansas while he researched his masterwork. That masterwork was In Cold Blood, published in 1966, a meticulously reported account of the 1959 murder of the Clutter family in Holcomb, Kansas. Capote called it a non-fiction novel, and essentially invented a new literary genre, true crime as high art. Before that, he'd already made his name with the novella Breakfast at Tiffany's, which became a beloved 1961 film starring Audrey Hepburn, and with Other Voices, Other Rooms, published when he was just 23. Capote was as famous for his personality as his prose, a tiny, flamboyant figure with a high-pitched voice who became a fixture on talk shows and at the most glamorous parties in New York. His legendary 1966 black and white ball at the Plaza Hotel was called the Party of the Century. But the years after In Cold Blood were unkind. He struggled for decades to complete his next major work, Answered Prayers, and the excerpts he published alienated many of his society friends by revealing their secrets in thinly veiled fiction. Capote died on August 25, 1984, at the home of his friend Joanne Carson, the former wife of Johnny Carson. The cause of death was liver disease complicated by multiple drug intoxication. He was 59. His ashes were divided. Some rest here at Westwood, next to Joanne Carson's. Speaking of comedy, Let's visit a man who made America laugh for the better part of 5 decades. Don Knotts rests here, and if you grew up watching television in the 1960s, his face just popped into your head. Bug-eyed, nervous, impossibly thin. The funniest scaredy cat who ever lived. Born in Morgantown, West Virginia in 1924, Knotts struggled early on, performing as a ventriloquist and stand-up comedian before landing small television roles. Everything changed in 1960 when his friend Andy Griffith cast him as Deputy Barney Fife on The Andy Griffith Show. Knotts played the incompetent but lovable small-town deputy with such brilliance that he won 5 Emmy Awards for the role. 5 for the same character, which is almost unheard of. After leaving the show in 1965, Knotts became a box office draw in family comedies like The Incredible Mr. Limpet, The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, and The Reluctant Astronaut. In the 1970s, he joined the cast of Three's Company as the nosy landlord Ralph Furley, introducing himself to a whole new generation. Knotts once said the key to comedy was fear. He understood what it felt like to be anxious and small in a big world, and he turned that into art. He died on February 24, 2006, from pulmonary and respiratory complications related to lung cancer. He was 81. Our next stop carries a much heavier weight. Nearby, we find the grave of Dominique Dunne, and her story is one of the saddest in this cemetery. Dominique was the daughter of writer and journalist Dominique Dunne and ranching heiress Ellen Griffin. She was just beginning what looked like a very promising career. In 1982, at 22 years old, she played Dana Freeling, the sardonic teenage daughter, in Steven Spielberg's blockbuster horror film Poltergeist. She was talented, well-connected, and had roles lined up. She'd been cast in the science fiction miniseries V and was expected to return for Poltergeist sequels. On October 30, 1982, Dominique was at her West Hollywood home rehearsing lines with a fellow actor when her ex-boyfriend, a chef named John Thomas Sweeney, showed up at the door. They went outside to talk. What followed was a violent argument in which Sweeney strangled Dominique on her own front steps. She never regained consciousness and was removed from life support 5 days later on November 4, 1982. She was 22 years old. Sweeney was convicted of voluntary manslaughter, not murder, and sentenced to 6.5 years. He served roughly 2.5. The verdict devastated and enraged the Dunne family. Dominique's father channeled his grief into a writing career that focused on crime and justice, becoming one of Vanity Fair's most prominent voices and covering high-profile cases including the Menendez brothers' trial. Dominique's mother, Ellen, founded the victims' rights organization Justice for Homicide Victims. After such a difficult story, let's turn to a voice that could soothe any broken heart. Roy Orbison is here at Westwood, though his grave is unmarked. You know him the moment you hear him, that soaring, operatic tenor voice that was unlike anything else in rock and roll. Oh, pretty woman, crying, only the lonely, in dreams. These weren't just hit songs, they were emotional experiences. Born in Vernon, Texas in 1936, Orbison got his start at Sun Records alongside Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, and Jerry Lee Lewis. But he was always different from the other rockabilly rebels. He stood still on stage, wore dark sunglasses, originally because he'd left his regular glasses on an airplane, and let that astonishing voice do all the work. By the early 1960s, he was one of the biggest stars in the world, rivaling even the Beatles, who idolized him. His career faded in the late 1960s after a series of personal tragedies. His first wife, Claudette, was killed in a motorcycle accident in 1966, and 2 of his 3 sons died in a house fire in 1968. But Orbison staged one of the great comebacks in rock history. In 1988, he joined the Traveling Wilburys, a supergroup with Bob Dylan, George Harrison, Tom Petty, and Jeff Lynne. That same year, his solo single You Got It became a top 5 hit. Just as everything was coming together again, Orbison died of a heart attack on December 6, 1988. He was 52. His posthumous album, Mystery Girl, became his best-selling record. From a master of song, we turn to a master of cinema. Billy Wilder rests here at Westwood, and his legacy behind the camera rivals anyone who ever worked in Hollywood. Born Samuel Wilder in the town of Sucha in what was then Austria-Hungary in 1906, he fled Europe in the 1930s as the Nazis rose to power. His mother, grandmother, and stepfather all perished in the Holocaust, a tragedy that informed the sharp, sometimes cynical edge of his work. In Hollywood, Wilder became the rare filmmaker who excelled at both comedy and drama, often blending them in the same picture. Some Like It Hot, the 1959 comedy starring Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, and Jack Lemmon, two of whom rest nearby in this very cemetery, is regularly voted the funniest American film ever made. The Apartment won the Academy Award for Best Picture in 1960. Sunset Boulevard is one of the darkest and most brilliant films about Hollywood ever produced. Double Indemnity defined film noir. Stalag 17 won William Holden an Oscar. And The Lost Weekend was one of the first serious Hollywood films to deal with alcoholism. Wilder won 6 Academy Awards over his career, 2 for directing, 3 for writing, and 1 for producing, and was nominated for 21. He was also one of the great wits of his era, famous for his one-liners. He died on March 27, 2002, at the age of 95. He'd been in declining health for several years, suffering from pneumonia and other ailments. Across the way from the man who directed her in one of her most iconic performances, we find another name that defined an era. Farrah Fawcett became a cultural phenomenon almost overnight in 1976. That year, she appeared in just one season of the television series Charlie's Angels, playing private investigator Jill Monroe, and a certain red swimsuit poster became the best-selling poster in history, with 12 million copies sold. Born in Corpus Christi, Texas in 1947, Fawcett arrived in Hollywood after attending the University of Texas, where she was named one of the 10 most beautiful women on campus. After years of commercials and small roles, Charlie's Angels made her an instant superstar. But Fawcett wanted to be taken seriously as an actress, and she proved she had the talent. Her performance in the 1984 television film The Burning Bed as a battered wife who sets her abusive husband's bed on fire earned her a Golden Globe nomination and critical respect. She also earned acclaim on the stage in the off-Broadway production of Extremities and received an Emmy nomination for the 1989 film Small Sacrifices. Her personal life was tabloid fodder for decades, particularly her long relationship with actor Ryan O'Neal, who also rests here at Westwood. Fawcett was diagnosed with anal cancer in 2006 and fought the disease publicly and bravely, documenting her treatment in a 2009 television special. She died on June 25, 2009, at the age of 62. Her death was somewhat overshadowed in the news cycle because Michael Jackson died the same day. Let's step outside the world of entertainment for a moment. Also resting at Westwood is Armand Hammer, one of the most fascinating and controversial businessmen of the 20th century. Born in New York City in 1898, Hammer was the son of a Russian-born doctor who was one of the founders of the American Communist Party. Young Armand traveled to the Soviet Union in the 1920s, where he met Lenin himself and established business ties that would last a lifetime. He became a multimillionaire trading in Russian art and fur, and later became chairman and CEO of Occidental Petroleum, transforming it into one of the world's largest oil companies. Hammer moved freely between the worlds of business, politics, and diplomacy for decades, serving as an unofficial back channel between Washington and Moscow during the Cold War. He was also a major art collector and philanthropist. The Hammer Museum in Westwood, just blocks from this cemetery, bears his name. His critics called him an opportunist, a self-promoter, and worse. He pleaded guilty in 1975 to making illegal campaign contributions to Richard Nixon, though he was later pardoned by George H.W. Bush. Hammer died on December 10, 1990, of bone marrow cancer. He was 92. From the world of oil and international intrigue, we return to the screen, and to one of the most likable actors Hollywood ever produced. Jack Lemmon is here, and in a cemetery full of stars, his is one of the names that draws the warmest smiles. Born John Euler Lemmon III in Newton, Massachusetts in 1925, he was Harvard-educated and originally trained for the stage before making his way to Hollywood. His big break came in 1955 with Mr. Roberts, for which he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. From there, Lemmon became the rare actor who could do absolutely everything: screwball comedy, tense drama, farce, and everything in between. In Some Like It Hot, he and Tony Curtis dressed in drag and tried to keep up with Marilyn Monroe. In The Apartment, he played a lonely office worker lending his apartment to his philandering bosses. In Days of Wine and Roses, he delivered a devastating portrayal of an alcoholic. He and Walter Matthau, who also rests at Westwood and will visit shortly, became one of the great screen pairings of all time, starring together in The Odd Couple, The Fortune Cookie, and Grumpy Old Men, among others. Lemmon won a second Academy Award for Best Actor for Save the Tiger in 1973, making him one of the few actors to win in both the supporting and leading categories. He was nominated 8 times overall. He died on June 27, 2001, of bladder and colon cancer. He was 76. Now let's give a listen to one of the most distinctive voices in American popular music. Peggy Lee is here, and when you hear Fever or Is That All There Is, you're hearing a woman who took singing and turned it into something closer to acting. Every note was a choice. Every pause was loaded with meaning. Born Norma Dolores Egstrom in Jamestown, North Dakota in 1920, she endured a brutal childhood with an abusive stepmother before escaping into music. Benny Goodman hired her as his band vocalist in 1941, and her recording of Why Don't You Do Right became a sensation. She went solo, and the hits kept coming. Mañana, Fever, her co-written classic It's a Good Day. She also co-wrote nearly all the songs for the 1955 Disney animated film Lady and the Tramp, including He's a Tramp and the Siamese Cat song, and voiced several characters. Lee was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her role in the 1955 film Pete Kelly's Blues, a rare honor for a singer. Her later career produced what many consider her masterpiece, the 1969 single Is That All There Is, a world-weary reflection on disillusionment set to a Randy Newman-influenced arrangement by Lieber and Stoller. The song won her a Grammy. Peggy Lee died on January 21, 2002, at the age of 81, after years of declining health including diabetes and a series of strokes. This next stop involves a story as dark as any Hollywood crime film. Bob Crane, the star of the beloved 1960s sitcom Hogan's Heroes, rests at Westwood, though he wasn't originally buried here. Before he was an actor, Crane was one of the most popular radio disc jockeys in Los Angeles, hosting the morning show on CBS flagship station KNX. His wit and charm caught the attention of television producers, and in 1965 he was cast as Colonel Robert Hogan, the wisecracking American POW who constantly outwits his bumbling German captors. The show was an immediate hit and ran for 6 seasons. Crane was nominated for 2 Emmy Awards. After the show ended in 1971, however, his career stalled. He took roles in dinner theater productions, touring the country in a play called Beginner's Luck. On June 29, 1978, Crane was found bludgeoned to death in his apartment in Scottsdale, Arizona, with an electrical cord tied around his neck. He was 49. His friend John Henry Carpenter, a video equipment salesman, was the primary suspect. The two men had shared a troubled friendship that involved recording their sexual encounters with various women. Carpenter was finally tried in 1994, 16 years after the murder, but was acquitted due to insufficient evidence. He maintained his innocence until his death in 1998. The case remains unsolved. Crane's second wife, Patricia Olson, who had appeared on Hogan's Heroes under the stage name Sigrid Valdis, later had his remains moved here to Westwood, and she is buried beside him. After a story like that, let's visit someone who brought a lighter touch to everything she did. Eva Gabor rests here at Westwood, and while her more famous sister Zsa Zsa generated endless tabloid headlines, Eva quietly built the more successful acting career. Born in Budapest, Hungary, in 1919, she was the youngest of the three glamorous Gabor sisters. Eva found her greatest fame in the 1960s sitcom Green Acres, where she played Lisa Douglas, the elegant New York socialite forced to live on a broken-down farm with her husband, played by Eddie Albert, who, as it happens, also rests here at Westwood. The show was absurdist comedy at its finest, and Eva's exasperated reactions to rural life made her a television icon. She was also a successful businesswoman, launching a wig company and a line of beauty products. And she was the voice of Duchess, the mother cat, in Disney's The Aristocats. Eva died on July 4, 1995, of respiratory failure and pneumonia following a fall. She was 76. Just one more thing. If you heard those words, you already know who we're visiting next. Peter Falk is here, and the character of Lieutenant Columbo is so indelibly linked to this man that it's hard to know where one ends and the other begins. Born in New York City in 1927, Falk lost his right eye to cancer at the age of 3 and wore a glass eye for the rest of his life. As a young man, he worked as an efficiency expert for the Connecticut State Budget Bureau before deciding to pursue acting. He earned 2 Academy Award nominations, for Murder, Inc. in 1960 and Pocketful of Miracles in 1961, before Columbo changed everything. The seemingly bumbling, raincoat-wearing homicide detective who always had just one more question became one of the most beloved characters in television history. The show ran in various incarnations from 1968 to 2003, earning Falk 4 Emmy Awards. What made Columbo special was the inversion of the detective formula. The audience always knew who the killer was, and the pleasure was watching Columbo figure it out, piece by piece, while pretending to be confused. Falk was also an accomplished film actor, working with directors like John Cassavetes, another Westwood resident, in films like A Woman Under the Influence and Husbands. He played the grandfather narrator in The Princess Bride, giving the world lines that are still quoted today. Falk died on June 23, 2011, of pneumonia, with complications from Alzheimer's disease. He was 83. From the gravel of a detective's voice to one of the most ethereal sounds ever captured on tape, Minnie Riperton rests here, and her story is both beautiful and heartbreaking. Born in Chicago in 1947, the youngest of 8 children, she trained in opera as a girl before falling in love with soul and rhythm and blues. In her teens, she sang backup for Chess Records artists, including Etta James, Chuck Berry, and Muddy Waters. She was the lead vocalist for the psychedelic soul group Rotary Connection, and she later sang in Stevie Wonder's backing group, Wonderlove. But it was her 1975 single Lovin' You that made her a star. A delicate love song built around birdsong and one of the most extraordinary vocal performances ever recorded. Riperton possessed a 5-octave range and could reach notes in the whistle register that seemed to come from another dimension entirely. Stevie Wonder co-produced her album Perfect Angel, from which the song was taken. Then, in January 1976, less than a year after Lovin' You hit #1, Riperton was diagnosed with breast cancer. The disease had already spread. She was given 6 months to live. Remarkably, she kept performing and recording, and she became one of the first celebrities to speak publicly about a breast cancer diagnosis, serving as a spokesperson for the American Cancer Society. President Jimmy Carter presented her with the organization's Courage Award at the White House in 1978. Riperton died on July 12, 1979, in her husband Richard Rudolph's arms, while listening to a recording Stevie Wonder had made for her. She was 31. Her daughter, Maya Rudolph, grew up to become a star on Saturday Night Live. From a life cut far too short, we move to one that stretched magnificently long. Kirk Douglas rests at Westwood alongside his wife Anne, and his story is one of the great self-invention narratives in American history. He was born Isser Danielovich in Amsterdam, New York in 1916, the son of illiterate Russian Jewish immigrants. His father was a ragman who collected junk with a horse and cart. Young Isser changed his name to Kirk Douglas, worked his way through St. Lawrence University, and clawed his way into Hollywood. That cleft chin and those blazing eyes made him a natural leading man, but it was his intensity that set him apart. His greatest role was as the rebellious slave in Spartacus in 1960, a film he also produced. And in producing it, he did something courageous. He hired blacklisted screenwriter Dalton Trumbo and insisted on giving him screen credit, effectively helping to break the Hollywood blacklist. Douglas earned 3 Academy Award nominations for Champion, The Bad and the Beautiful, and Lust for Life, in which he played Vincent van Gogh, but never won a competitive Oscar. The Academy gave him an honorary award in 1996. He survived a devastating helicopter crash in 1991 and a severe stroke in 1996, and he kept working and writing books well into his 90s. He was also the father of actor Michael Douglas. Kirk Douglas died on February 5, 2020, at the age of 103, one of the very last links to the golden age of Hollywood. Let's visit someone who embodied a different kind of golden age ideal. Donna Reed is here, and for many Americans, she will forever be the picture of grace and decency on screen. Born Donna Bell Mullinger on a farm in Denison, Iowa, in 1921, she came to Hollywood in 1941 and quickly established herself as one of the most likable presences in film. She's best remembered for 2 roles. The first is Mary Hatch Bailey in Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life, the beloved 1946 Christmas film opposite Jimmy Stewart. The second is the role that won her an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, Alma, the woman who falls for Montgomery Clift's character in From Here to Eternity in 1953. From 1958 to 1966, she starred in The Donna Reed Show, playing the quintessential American housewife and mother. The show ran for 8 seasons and made her one of the most familiar faces in American living rooms. Late in her career, she returned to television as Miss Ellie Ewing on Dallas in 1984, replacing Barbara Bel Geddes for 1 season. Reed died on January 14, 1986, just 3 months after being replaced on Dallas. The cause was pancreatic cancer. She was 64. After all that grace and poise, here's a man who made a career out of getting no respect. Rodney Dangerfield rests at Westwood, and even in death he manages to get a laugh. Born Jacob Rodney Cohen in Babylon, New York, in 1921, he started performing comedy as a teenager under the name Jack Roy, but gave it up for years to sell aluminum siding and support his family. He returned to stand-up in his 40s, reinvented himself as Rodney Dangerfield, and became one of the biggest comedy stars of the 1970s and 1980s with his trademark complaint, "I don't get no respect." He was a fixture on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, appearing over 70 times. In 1980, his starring role in the comedy Caddyshack made him a movie star, and he followed it with Easy Money and Back to School. Dangerfield also ran his own comedy club in New York, Dangerfield's, which became a launch pad for young comedians, including Jerry Seinfeld, Jim Carrey, and Roseanne Barr. Despite all the laughs, Dangerfield struggled with depression for much of his life. He died on October 5, 2004, of complications from heart surgery. He was 82. Speaking of the world of entertainment empires, the crypt right beside Marilyn Monroe's belongs to Hugh Hefner, the man who founded Playboy magazine. Born in Chicago in 1926, Hefner launched the magazine's first issue in December 1953, with Marilyn Monroe as the centerfold, using nude photos she had posed for years earlier, for which she was paid $50. Playboy became a cultural institution, and Hefner became the ultimate symbol of the bachelor lifestyle, holding court in silk pajamas at the Playboy Mansion in Los Angeles. The magazine published serious journalism and literary fiction alongside the pinup photos, featuring writers like Ray Bradbury, Kurt Vonnegut, and Norman Mailer. Hefner was also an early advocate for civil rights and First Amendment freedoms, though his legacy grew increasingly complicated as attitudes toward the objectification of women evolved over the decades. He purchased the crypt next to Monroe's in 1992 for $75,000, securing his place beside the woman whose image helped launch his empire. Hefner died of sepsis on September 27, 2017. He was 91. From one century's idea of glamour to another, let's visit Fanny Brice, one of the greatest entertainers of the early 20th century. Born Fania Borach on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in 1891, she became a star of the Ziegfeld Follies. the spectacular Broadway revue that defined American stage entertainment in the 1910s and 1920s. Brice was a comedian, singer, and actress who could move an audience from hysterical laughter to genuine tears within a single performance. Her most enduring creation was the character of Baby Snooks, a mischievous child she played on radio for nearly 2 decades, making her one of the most popular performers in the medium. Brice's turbulent love life, particularly her marriage to the charming but criminal gambler Nicky Arnstein, became the basis for one of the most beloved Broadway musicals of all time, Funny Girl, which made Barbra Streisand a star in 1964 and then again in the 1968 film adaptation. Brice herself died of a cerebral hemorrhage on May 29, 1951, at the age of 59. She was originally buried at another Los Angeles cemetery and was later moved to Westwood. Now let's pay our respects to the other half of one of cinema's great partnerships. Walter Matthau is here, and you can't talk about him without talking about Jack Lemmon, whom we visited earlier. The two of them together were pure magic. Matthau was born Walter John Matthau, he later altered the spelling, in New York City in 1920, the son of impoverished Eastern European Jewish immigrants. He served in the Army Air Forces during World War II before becoming a stage actor and, eventually, one of Hollywood's most distinctive character actors. His breakout film role came as the villain in The Fortune Cookie in 1966, for which he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. But it was The Odd Couple in 1968, playing slovenly sports writer Oscar Madison to Jack Lemmon's neurotic Felix Unger, that made him a star. Matthau was a degenerate gambler who once estimated he'd lost $5 million at the track over his lifetime, and he brought that rumpled, world-weary quality to every role. He could play comedy and drama with equal conviction, starring in films like The Bad News Bears, Charlie Varick, and The Taking of Pelham 123. Later in life, he and Lemmon reunited for Grumpy Old Men and Grumpier Old Men, proving that their chemistry was timeless. Matthau died of a heart attack on July 1, 2000. He was 79. From the stage and screen, let's pause at a quieter grave, that of Carl Wilson, the youngest of the 3 Wilson brothers who founded the Beach Boys. Born in Hawthorne, California in 1946, Carl was just 15 when the Beach Boys released their first single, Surfin', in 1961. While his brother Brian was the group's creative genius and Dennis was the wild man, Carl was the steady, gentle presence who held the band together through decades of turbulence. His pure, soaring voice was the lead on some of the group's most beautiful recordings, including God Only Knows, which Paul McCartney once called the greatest pop song ever written, and Good Vibrations. When Brian Wilson withdrew from touring in the mid-1960s, it was Carl who took charge on the road, becoming the band's musical director and keeping the live show going. He also showed considerable courage during the Vietnam War era, refusing induction as a conscientious objector and performing alternative service rather than serve in the military. Carl was diagnosed with lung cancer in 1997 and continued to perform with the Beach Boys even during his treatment. He died on February 6, 1998. He was 51. His son-in-law was Dean Martin's daughter Gina, connecting 2 Westwood families. From music to literature, and from one kind of Los Angeles glamour to another. Jackie Collins rests at Westwood, and if you spent any time in an airport bookstore between 1970 and 2010, you know her name. Born in London in 1937, the younger sister of actress Joan Collins, Jackie moved to Los Angeles as a teenager and fell in love with the city's mix of wealth, ambition, and scandal. She turned that fascination into a wildly successful career as a novelist, writing 32 books that sold over 500 million copies worldwide. Her most famous creation was Lucky Santangelo, the tough, glamorous heroine of a series of novels that mixed power, romance, and revenge. Titles like Hollywood Wives, The Stud, and The Bitch became enormous bestsellers, and she was unapologetic about writing popular entertainment. Critics sometimes dismissed her work, but Collins had the last laugh. She was one of the best-selling novelists of the 20th century. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2009, and kept her illness private for over 6 years, telling only her sisters. She died on September 19, 2015, at the age of 77. We visited Kirk Douglas earlier, and now we come to another towering figure of Golden Age Hollywood. Burt Lancaster rests here at Westwood, and his journey to stardom was unlike anyone else's. He was born in New York City in 1913 and began his career not as an actor, but as a circus acrobat, performing a horizontal bar act with his partner Nick Cravat. An injury ended his acrobatic career, and after serving in the Army during World War II, he stumbled into acting almost by accident. His breakout role came in the 1946 film Noir the Killers, and from there he became one of the most athletic and magnetic stars of the 1950s and 1960s. He's remembered for From Here to Eternity, that famous beach scene with Deborah Kerr, and for his Academy Award-winning performance in Elmer Gantry, playing a charismatic con man turned preacher with an energy that practically burns through the screen. Lancaster was also a serious and adventurous actor who took on challenging roles throughout his career, including the Birdman of Alcatraz, Atlantic City, and the Luchino Visconti epic The Leopard. His final film role was as the aging ballplayer Dr. Moonlight Graham in Field of Dreams. He was nominated 4 times for the Academy Award and won once. Lancaster died on October 20, 1994, of a heart attack. He was 80. Let's say hello to a man whose voice and smile greeted millions of Americans in their living rooms every weeknight. Richard Dawson rests here, and while younger generations might not know his name, anyone who watched television in the 1970s and 1980s remembers him. Born Colin Lionel M. in Gosport, England, in 1932, Dawson served in the British Merchant Navy as a teenager before pursuing a career in comedy and acting. In America, he became a regular on Hogan's Heroes, playing Corporal Peter Newkirk, the con man of the group, and appeared frequently on the game show and variety circuit. But his lasting fame came as the original host of Family Feud, beginning in 1976. Dawson became famous for kissing every female contestant on the show, a habit that was charming to some viewers and perplexing to others, but which became his signature. He hosted the show until 1985 and returned again from 1994 to 1995. There's a nice connection here. Dawson was the best man at Bob Crane's second wedding, and both men now rest at this same cemetery. Dawson died on June 2, 2012, of complications from esophageal cancer. He was 79. We visited Dominique Dunne's tragic story earlier, and now we come to another grave connected to the same film. Heather O'Rourke is here, the little girl who looked into the television screen in Poltergeist and uttered the words that became a cultural touchstone. They're here. She was discovered by Steven Spielberg himself when she was just 5 years old. He spotted her in the MGM commissary, having lunch with her mother while her older sister Tammy was filming Pennies from Heaven nearby. Spielberg cast her on the spot, choosing her over Drew Barrymore, who was given the role of Gertie in E.T. instead. With her long platinum hair, wide blue eyes, and soft voice, O'Rourke became the heart of the Poltergeist franchise, appearing in all 3 films. She also had recurring roles on Happy Days and Webster. In early 1987, she became ill and was misdiagnosed with Crohn's disease. The actual problem was a congenital intestinal stenosis, a narrowing of the intestine that she'd likely had since birth. On January 31, 1988, she suddenly became violently ill. The next morning, she collapsed at home and went into cardiac arrest in the ambulance. Surgeons at Children's Hospital of San Diego discovered the bowel obstruction and operated, but the resulting septic shock was too much for her small body. Heather O'Rourke died on February 1, 1988. She was 12 years old. She and Dominique Dunne, who played her on-screen sister, now rest in the same cemetery, a coincidence that has fueled decades of talk about a so-called poltergeist curse. From the most innocent spirit on our tour to one of the most iconoclastic, Frank Zappa rests here at Westwood, though his grave is unmarked, fitting for a man who spent his entire career refusing to play by anyone else's rules. Born in Baltimore in 1940, Zappa was a self-taught composer, guitarist, bandleader, filmmaker, and tireless provocateur. With his band The Mothers of Invention, he produced some of the most adventurous and challenging rock music ever recorded, beginning with their 1966 debut album, Freak Out, one of the earliest rock double albums. Over the next 3 decades, Zappa released over 60 albums of startling variety: satirical rock, jazz fusion, orchestral compositions, electronic music, and genres that defied any label. Albums like Hot Rats, Apostrophe, and Joe's Garage earned him a devoted following. He was a perfectionist in the studio, a ferocious critic of censorship, and a surprisingly effective citizen when he testified before the United States Senate in 1985 against the Parents Music Resource Center's efforts to label record albums. His testimony was articulate, witty, and devastating, and it remains a landmark moment in the fight for artistic freedom. Zappa was also a devoted family man. His 4 children, Moon Unit, Dweezil, Amit, and Diva, all carry names that reflect their father's unconventional spirit. In 1990, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He continued working at an extraordinary pace, completing several orchestral albums and a final rock album, Civilization Phase 3, before his death on December 4, 1993. He was 52. And now we arrive at the most visited spot in this cemetery. The most visited grave, in fact, in all of Los Angeles, and perhaps in all of America. The crypt of Marilyn Monroe draws visitors from around the world every single day. She was born Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1, 1926, at Los Angeles General Hospital. Her childhood was one of foster homes and instability. Her mother struggled with mental illness, and Norma Jean never knew her father. She married for the first time at 16, more to escape her circumstances than for love. During World War II, while working at a munitions factory, she was discovered by an army photographer taking pictures of women contributing to the war effort. That led to modeling work, and modeling led to a contract at 20th Century Fox, where executive Ben Lyon helped her choose a new name: Marilyn, after Broadway star Marilyn Miller, and Monroe, her mother's maiden name. She spent years working towards stardom, enduring small parts and the casting couch culture of the studio system. Her breakout came in 1950 with small but memorable roles in All About Eve and The Asphalt Jungle. By 1953, after Niagara and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, she was the biggest star in Hollywood. That breathy voice, those platinum curls, that knowing smile. Monroe became the defining sex symbol of the 1950s and one of the most photographed people in history. But she was so much more than the dumb blonde parts the studios gave her. Frustrated with being typecast, she moved to New York, studied at the Actors Studio under Lee Strasberg, and returned to Hollywood on her own terms. Bus Stop, in 1956, proved she could act. Some Like It Hot, in 1959, proved she could be funny. And her personal life became as famous as her films. Marriages to baseball legend Joe DiMaggio and playwright Arthur Miller, rumored relationships with the most powerful men in the country, and a constant, very public struggle with loneliness, insomnia, and the pressures of fame. Her final completed film was The Misfits in 1961, opposite Clark Gable and Montgomery Clift, a movie haunted by the fact that all 3 leads would be dead within a few years of its release. In the spring of 1962, she sang Happy Birthday, Mr. President to John F. Kennedy at Madison Square Garden, a performance that lives on as one of the most iconic moments in American popular culture. On the night of August 4, 1962, Monroe died at her Brentwood home from an overdose of barbiturates. She was 36 years old. The coroner ruled that she had likely taken her own life, though conspiracy theories about the circumstances of her death have never subsided. Joe DiMaggio arranged her funeral, a small, private service, and barred most of Hollywood from attending. According to a widely told story, DiMaggio had red roses delivered to her crypt 3 times a week for the next 20 years. Marilyn Monroe's crypt is in the Corridor of Memories, a wall of marble-fronted vaults at the western edge of the cemetery. Visitors leave flowers and lipstick kisses on the marble. It was at this small, quiet cemetery, chosen because it was the resting place of Grace Goddard, the childhood guardian who had helped care for young Norma Jean, that Monroe was laid to rest. The irony is that Westwood was a quiet, out-of-the-way place in 1962. It was Monroe's presence that turned it into the celebrity burial ground it is today. Nearly every famous person we visited on this tour was buried here, in part because Marilyn Monroe was here first. And with that, our walk through Westwood Village Memorial Park comes to an end. 30 stories, 30 lives, and a small patch of ground that holds more of the American century than almost any place its size. Thank you for joining us.